But I don't think, as we said, anybody takes any result for granted.
Yeah, no. True.
Now, before we get some news from the England camp and we get our thoughts from James Ollie and what's ahead for England, we just want to mention Canada, who went out of the groups today. Well, they went out in the groups today. Obviously, it was a valiant effort from the boys. We saw that first game against Belgium when I feel as though they became everyone's darlings after just one game. Then after that game, their coach, Herdman, said, well, I'll tell you what he said, but I can't tell you it properly because this is a
go on,
family
Kate.
show.
That was what he said properly.
He said, they belong here and we are going to go and F Croatia. It's as simple as it gets. To which this obviously fired up the Croatians. We saw it in the Croatian press. They couldn't believe this was said. I mean, I thought fair play to you, because if there's a few nations I'm not going to want to upset, Croatia is definitely one of them. And to say that as well about, a World Cup finalist with Luka Modric in the side too, no less.
Exactly.
I thought that is a brave move. Anyway, after the game, which Croatia won, even though they went behind first, Kramaric said, I want to thank Canada's coach for the motivation. We demonstrated who effed who.
Yeah.
Do you think it was naive from Herdman, these comments, Luis, or do you like that he had that after that game?
Both. I love that he said that. I love the fact that John Herdman was like all about it. And yes, it was wrong, because I'm just predicting, I'm imagining this sort of Rocky 3 situation where like Dolph Lundgren's just like getting like reffed up in his gym, and Kramaric just enters the dressing room and he presses play in front of all the Croatian. Listen, Croatian redemption is scary, man. You don't want Kramaric to be like, hey, boys, look what this Canadian coach just said to us. That's just going to rev everybody up. Oh, and by the way, they happen to have one of the best players in modern game in Luka Modric, and that's exactly what happened. Listen, like Croatia deserved to win. Canada, like you said, has been one of the darlings of this tournament. So, and they give me a lot of similarities from my own Peru back in 2018. Played really good stuff, or at least adventurous stuff, but at the end of the day, just a little bit too naive. Also, by the way, both nations waiting 36 years for the World Cup. There was no defensive, resiliency with Canada. Every time they lost the ball, it was an absolute mess at the back. And Croatia didn't make the final of 2018 just for pure luck. They know exactly who they are. And Kramaric, I thought, was like great, but nobody was around him for like 85 minutes. What else is he going to do? He's going to put it in the back of the net. So Canada, I absolutely commend you. John Herdman, really heroic words, but the Croatian revenge is here, and they took care of business for sure.
He is from my native northeast as well. Go on, Shaka.
Let me just say, I think a lot of this is full outrage and making a story where there really isn't. And I've been on both sides of this equation, right? Immediately after a game that you make your World Cup, I nearly said debut, but it's been 40 years since Canada have appeared in a World Cup. Yeah. You battle really hard against Belgium. You have a penalty save. You play so well, and you lose narrowly by a goal to nil. And I know we were talking about Belgium earlier, but Belgium come into this tournament, I think, ranked number 2 in the world. And here you are, small Canada, having top CONCACAF qualifying, go toe-to-toe with them. And I understand the emotion of that situation. And he gets his team in a group, and he says, we're unlucky here, and next game, this is what we're going to do. And that's just what everybody does in that sort of circumstance. The emotions are running high. And that's what I've been there. I've heard those conversations. I've heard those things said. And to be honest, if I'm a player, that's exactly what I want to hear from my coach. That's exactly what I want to hear from each other.
Yep.
On the other side of that same coin, though, it gets reported in a way that, and here's the other thing, when you're on the other side of that coin, every little thing the opponent says, you try to take and use as motivation. If the opponent dare say, well, we think we can win, we're like, how dare they think they're going to beat us? And you plaster the clip.
That's a very polite way of saying what he said, Shaka.
No, all I'm saying is it doesn't matter what's said. It's going to be twisted, which is why you see managers in pre-game press conferences be as bland as they are, because they know no matter what they said, it will be twisted. But Herdman says this in an emotional time, and I stand by. I have no problem with that.
I've got to stick up for journalism here. Firstly, because I don't think a manager saying we're going to F another team needs any twisting or spin at all. It's pretty clear what he's saying. But a bit more context to that is that he said that in a flash interview, which takes place immediately after the game. And in those interviews, you know, when the blood's still pumping, the adrenaline's still there, I can see how managers players, whoever's doing those interviews can get carried away. But I actually covered that game. And he came into the press conference, the written press conference, which takes place a good 30, sometimes 40 minutes after the final whistle. And he said virtually the same thing. And I think what he was trying to do, he talked a lot about the brotherhood. He used that word a lot. He's trying to get this sort of collective, cohesive, you know, team bonding. It was a siege mentality tactic, I think. And I just think it backfired on him.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of naivety. I think he probably didn't quite understand how the Croatians were going to react to something like that. And I think if he had his time again, he probably wouldn't have used those words. So,
yeah, which is why I said, James, at the very beginning of this, I think it was great that he said it, but also really naive. I mean, ultimately, what he said was a metaphor for the match because Canada was very eager, very willing. I'm the biggest fan of what I saw from the game against Belgium, but they were very naive in that game, specifically off the ball against the counter. And there were a few emotional choices for John Herdman in that game as well. I think a few substitutes should have come in earlier on because off the ball, they weren't at it. And it clearly showed with a very, very good Croatia. I don't take anything away from Canada. I am so proud of what they have done. And no doubt they're going to come back and learn from this. But it's a great thing that John Herdman said that. And it's also a terrible thing because Croatia were more than ready.
I do love it, though, because everyone's so polished these days in media interviews after games.
Exactly.
And let me just say, that's my point. To James's point, I'm not having a go at journalists here for reporting at all. All I'm saying is from a player's perspective, if I'm Canadian, that's exactly what I want to hear from my coach.
Totally.
That's exactly what I want to hear from my coach.
Yes.
If I'm Croatian and I hear somebody say that, I know exactly how I want my coach and my press to spin that.
Thank you very much for watching ESPN FC on YouTube. For more highlights, analysis and exclusive content, be sure to subscribe.